going on right now all across this city. The moment is now. The moment is now to seize and get what we deserve.
In 2020, what's possible has completely cracked open.
Now is the time to dream big.
When we're rooted in safety and community care,
we build a world that has food for everyone,
education for all, and thriving communities.
When we're rooted in deep respect for our land,
air, water, and relatives,
we grow food in a way that honors our interconnectedness.
When we're rooted in our love for one another, we build ways to care for everyone.
When we're rooted in collective action, we take on the entrenched power that is too big for any one of us to topple alone.
When we're rooted in history, we create a more fair, just world.
Using the lessons of our ancestors who came before us.
When we're rooted in justice, we will tear down the structures and systems that divide us by race and gender
to shore up power for a wealthy few.
We will build a new world where everyone has clean air,
fresh water,
and a chance to live their full potential with no exceptions.
Political and economic power brokers are making that difficult by doing whatever they've always done.
Stoking fear and dividing us against one another.
To keep power and rig the rules in their favor.
Meanwhile, our communities suffer. Climate change ravages our towns, and life gets harder.
Things are reaching
the breaking
point. Repeat after me. No more crumbs. No more crumbs. No more crumbs. Because we walking out with the whole damn loaf of bread. Yeah. Keep that energy going. Black lives. Black lives. Black lives. Hell yeah, they do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Mohan. My pronouns are he and him, and we share our pronouns at the beginning of every CCI and CCI action event, because understanding and using people's correct gender pronouns helps ensure an inclusive culture where all of our voices are given equitable power, because we're here to build a multiracial and a multi-generational and a multi-geographical movement for justice. And we believe that sharing our pronouns is just one way where we can model this inclusiveness.
Thanks, Tom. My name is Sheree Ortiz, and my pronouns are she, her.
Now, I'm the board president of Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. We're a 45-year-old organization. We were founded in Waterloo, Iowa, that helps everyday people be a powerful force for social justice. I'm a retired social worker, and I'm coming to you live from the Siouxland area in Sioux City.
And I'm the board president of Iowa CCI Action. We work to build people-fueled political power in Iowa as an independent movement that puts communities before corporate profits. I'm a retired public school teacher from East Des Moines, and I'm involved in this work because I believe in the power of everyday people to make real change.
We're very excited to welcome you here today, to everyone and everyone here listening, because we want to be involved with our Rooted in Justice CCI Action's first ever virtual convention here this morning. This year, we're gathering voices from across the state and across the nation. We're going to chart a path forward for a bold path for progressive people-powered politics. You're going to hear this morning from our speakers today, so feel free to add your voice by offering comments below. If you need a transcript for today's remarks, please check out our transcript at cciaction.org/rootedscript.
Before we begin, we want to pause for an acknowledgement of the land and labor our work is built on. All of us participating in the convention from the United States are sitting on stolen land. In Des Moines, where CCI is headquartered, we are living on the ancestral land of many people, including the Sauk, the Sioux, Iowa, and Meskwaki people.
both the state of Iowa and the U.S. government. You've carried out genocide, ethnic cleansing, and forced removal against indigenous people. And despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, this still is indigenous land.
We pause to acknowledge the labor of all who worked and continued to work the land against their will. Millions were stolen from their homes to work and live and die for the sake of an unjust economic system.
This morning, we want to offer special thanks to Native Governance and Whitney McGuire for their example in developing this land and labor acknowledgement. Our work is not done until we uproot the injustices this nation is built upon. So let's commit ourselves to learning and to healing and coming to terms with our past so we may generate a more just future.
Our hearts are with people in the struggle all around the world right now, and with the folks on the ground in Kenosha, Wisconsin this week, after a white terrorist shot and killed protesters. The deep white supremacy our country is built on is evident in this story. Before shooting 3 people, the man was welcomed by Kenosha police, given water, and thanked. After shooting 3 people, police let the gunman walk past them and leave the scene with a rifle over his shoulder and his hands in the air as members of the crowd were yelling for him to be arrested. He was later apprehended in Illinois. Police protected a man who killed nonviolent activists protesting police violence. And the story has an Iowa connection. Last January, the Kenosha shooter came to Des Moines for the Trump rally hosted by Drake University. This rally filled the neighborhood CCI calls home with thousands of people, all gathering to hear the racist rhetoric of the president. That day, our staff, our members, and our neighbors in the predominantly Black and brown neighborhood reported feeling unsafe, knowing that the attendees subscribed to racist, sexist, and homophobic lies that put us in danger and keep working class people divided. And the shooter was in the front row that night, eating up Trump's law and order talking points. Many of you are already familiar with CCI Action's transformative work, but it goes beyond the Trump administration, and it goes beyond party politics. We fight for racial justice, economic justice, and environmental justice because all people around the globe deserve safe and healthy communities where we can thrive.
And we know that professional politicians and partisan pundits, they're playing into an unfair and frankly an uninspiring way of doing politics. It's time now to replace them with candidates who come from our movements and who share our vision of the future. We need real solutions, not half-assed stopgap measures that only serve the super rich. But we continue to see resistance to change. In the Des Moines City Council, they still refuse to pass our comprehensive ban on racial profiling, and they continue to give unchecked power to the police, even as the Des Moines Police Department continues to harass and arrest community leaders for speaking out. Thankfully, groups like Des Moines' Black Liberation Movement are rising up to chart a new path forward, one where we invest in our neighborhoods and we're divesting from police violence. At the State House, failed leaders like COVID Kim Reynolds have put profits ahead of our lives by refusing to take statewide action. Even after a record number of new cases this week, Governor Reynolds will not issue a statewide face covering policy. That's why we launched our Mask Up Iowa petition, which over 6,000 people now have signed, demanding a common sense solution that can help stop the spread of COVID-19. When local leaders felt the heat from organized people power, a few stepped up, and some cities have passed a mask requirement. But Governor Reynolds still refuses to act. And even today, he's rushing to cram students back into crowded classrooms, which is why brave teachers, staff, parents, and allies took to the streets earlier this month to demand a safer return to schools.
COVID has threatened our communities. but it's our leaders' lack of action that cause the real harm. Some of our elected officials, like Donald Trump and Kim Reynolds, puts the needs of big money corporations before our lives, and others, like Cindy Axne and Abby Finkenauer, offered pathetic, middle-of-the-road alternatives that leave out our immigrant communities. That's why Iowa CCI Action is pushing for policies like a people's bailout. We must guarantee healthcare as a human right through Medicare for all and extend economic support directly to the people.
And we know that COVID-19 is not the only crisis we're facing, though. The recent climate disaster left many communities completely in shambles. Neighborhoods came together to deal with the devastation, but our governor, she was missing in action. She was offering corporate bailouts instead of sustainable solutions.
Unfortunately, climate disasters like the ones we saw earlier this month will likely only get worse. The megastorms happening in Iowa, the twin hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, and the wildfires in California are evidence of the increasing effects of climate chaos. Industrial agriculture and factory farms are poisoning our land and water and feeding climate-changing emissions into the atmosphere. This is not just risking the public health, it's also risking our planet's health.
That's why this year, CCI Action continued our fight against Big Ag's unchecked power. We filed a lawsuit demanding that the state of Iowa protect our right to clean water, and we're going all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court. We're also continuing to organize against factory farm expansions into our communities. And we're calling for a Green New Deal that guarantees universal employment through a federal jobs guarantee.
During a crisis, we can only pull through if we pull together and put people first. And today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to hear from some amazing organizers and change makers. They'll talk about the work we need to do in Iowa and across the world to build a more just future that includes all of us.
And we'll hear about how you are the backbone of CCI Action's work. Our movement is truly people-powered, and we cannot do it without each and every one of you. We're here to organize. That's you and me and everyone here watching this morning, working together to change. We'll be asking you to sign up to take action on some of the most pressing issues we're challenged with today. And we're going to be raising some money. We've got to do the work, and we've got to fund the work.
So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. To kick us off, we have Sebastian. Sean is the senior strategist for rural people and Planet First campaigns at People's Action. In 2019, Sean served as the Iowa organizing director of the Working Families Party and a movement politics organizer for CCI Action. Sean was the director of the Fed Up campaign at the Center for Popular Democracy, organizing working class people of color for universal employment. Sean is an alum of New York University School of Law, a member of the New York Bar, and was a lecturer in law at Columbia Law School teaching law and organizing for social change.
We're very excited to have Sean join us today. So without further introduction, Sean, come join us.
Thank you so much for that incredibly kind introduction. I'm so grateful to be here with my CCI family, and it is family, and I'm so grateful to be included among this incredible array of speakers, many of whom are heroes of mine, myself, and many of whom I've admired from afar. The reason why I consider CCI Action family is because, you know, families get through hard times together, and the moment we're in is so big and so much is happening that we need all of us together to all play a role to meet this moment. And there's no one I'd rather do that with than all of you at CCI Action. So thank you so much for including me. And I'm just going to try to say a little bit in the simplest terms possible about the moment we're in. And the work that we do together and the things that we need to do together that are too big for any of us to hold alone, I'm going to try to walk through. We're going to be doing some grieving. We need to do some visioning about how to get out of this moment. And of course, we need to be energized to actually make those visions a reality. And all of those things are things that we do together at CCI Action. I want to talk about grieving, first of all. Grieving is an act of resistance because politicians in power right now don't want you to absorb the sheer scale of what is happening. There were 60,000 American casualties in Vietnam, and think about the scar and the mourning that leaves on our psyche. There are 180,000 deaths right now. And our politicians are asking us to get used to it. They're telling us those people don't matter. They're telling us that sickness and death at this level is just a way of life. And grieving is a way to honor the dead and to show them that this is an ending. This is an ending of a rule that is making millions sick and killing thousands. 6 million people in the United States are sick. 180,000 people are dead, and 40 million people are unemployed. This is catastrophic. This is the end of an ideology. This is the end of a rule by an unaccountable political class. And in this massive failure of the United States among the entire world, Iowa is the worst place in the United States officially. It is a global COVID hotspot, the worst state in the United States. Iowa is one of the most dangerous places on earth. And that is because of governance failure. We are one of the most dangerous places on earth because of Kim Reynolds, Joni Ernst, and Donald Trump. This is a man-made disaster causing death of an unimaginable scale. Iowans are dying because politicians are failing. We had warning. There were governments around the world who did the simple thing of what needed to be done. They issued stay-at-home orders. They gave people money so that they could stay at home, keep their families safe, and keep their families fed. And our leadership refused to. Governor Kim Reynolds defied science. She defied economists. She defied parents, mothers and fathers who just want to keep their kids safe. And she forced workers into meatpacking plants. She made Iowa a global hotspot. She is responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. And while this catastrophe was happening, Joni Ernst made sure to rip the lifeline of unemployment from 40 million people. It was not only unimaginably cruel in the middle of an economic crisis, but it is absolutely economically illiterate. It is going to create another economic crisis. These people are unable to imagine solutions to our most pressing problems, a deadly pandemic, an economic crisis the scale of the Great Depression. All they can do is cause more harm. And how do they present themselves? They are pretending like nothing is happening. They're pretending that 40 million people are not unemployed and that 1,000 Iowans haven't died, that Iowa isn't one of the most dangerous places on earth. Just this week, they kowtowed to Donald Trump and celebrated his deadly failure and their own deadly failure, pulling the curtain to hide all the bodies and all the sickness that is in Iowa. That is their strategy. They want you to forget about the dead. That is why grieving is so important. The best way to honor the dead is to remember them and to get these people out. But they're not even trying to win the election. They're not trying to present solutions to our most pressing problems. They have no plan for the pandemic. They have no plan for jobs. Their only plan is to steal the election. And this week, we've seen the Trump administration suing to make voting harder. They're doing it in plain sight. That's why the best way to honor the dead is to organize to make sure the people who killed them are no longer in a position of power to continue doing so. Our current system is brittle and broken, and it wasn't built to last. And that's why we have the opportunity now and the responsibility to build something better. And that's another thing we do together at Iowa CCI. We vision the future. Together with partners, we built a rural agenda that imagines another world. We imagine a job guarantee to do all of the work that needs to get done, a caring corps that provides high quality childcare and elder care, a green jobs corps where we can build the infrastructure we need, renewable energy, solar energy, broadband, and more. And everyone has a job at a dignified wage and the freedom to unionize. We can have a homegrown food and ag system, break up big ag, have fair prices for family farmers, stop CAFOs, end CAFOs and end them poisoning the water, bringing more family farmers, more Black and Latinx farmers onto the land. We can have a people-centered system instead of extractive infrastructure. We can have distributed, decentralized economies and energy. So when our power goes out, we're not waiting a week for Mid-American Energy to stop dragging its feet and connect us back. This is a world that is possible if we all work together, if we come together, and Iowa CCI is the place that this world can become a reality, but we have so many steps before to get there, and every step requires us to build more people power together. So this is what I'm asking all of you to do. The only way that we can win the world that we deserve is through collective action. We need to win this election. And in the weeks immediately after quote unquote election night, we need to be in the streets to make sure that every vote is counted. And then after that, we need to continue the fight with the new administration because this world is not going to be handed to us. We need to be rooted in justice together. And every single one of you will play an essential role in this historic moment. And by joining and supporting CCI Action, you know there are members across Iowa, 5,000 dues-paying members across Iowa who are fighting alongside of you, playing equally important roles and doing the work that needs to be done. So I am a dues-paying member. If you're not a dues-paying member, become one. Make a donation, sign up for a phone banking shift, and join a campaign for long-term change, because Iowa CCI works 7 days a week, 365 days a year, every year, not just in an election year. To win the world we want, winning the election is a necessary first step. Voting is the minimum, and we are going to keep working beyond the election because we're not electing saviors. We're electing the people we're negotiating against. And this is a hard, difficult, at times hopeless time, but we have to remember that there are so many people on our side, and together we are doing incredible things already. The Black Lives Matter protest was the largest uprising and civic engagement in the history of this country, with protests obviously in Des Moines and across the country, even in tiny, tiny small towns. Historians have never seen anything like this. And the Des Moines Liberation Movement has inspired all of us. They fought against felon disenfranchisement and won. They won by being in the streets every day. They've done incredible things. And by joining together, we can continue to do incredible things. To do that, we need to build power, and we need to build a bigger we. And there are so many people out there to talk to through Iowa CCI. There are so many people who are coming through this crisis, and they are questioning if some of the lowest paid, most expendable workers are actually essential. Maybe meat packers deserve to be safe from illness and injury. Maybe all work should have dignity, and workers should have a say over their conditions of work. If we can spend trillions of dollars like that in the blink of an eye, maybe we can actually afford things like universal health care and the Green New Deal. If Black people are more likely to die at the hands of police, and a big reason for that is because they're over-policed, maybe the Des Moines Police Department doesn't need $100,000 in extra ammunition to shoot at young people. Maybe we should redirect that money towards housing, jobs, and social services. And if in a pandemic, my health is dependent on my neighbor's health, maybe we need to care for all people all the time, whether they have a job or not. And if the systems we rely on to live in a modern society are so fragile that they're caving in on themselves, maybe we need to build new systems so our families can not only survive, but thrive with full lives full of security, hope, and joy. I want to end with this quote, and I want you all to remember this as we listen to the amazing speakers coming next. This is a quote from one of my favorite thinkers, Arundhati Roy. Remember this: we be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to my family at CCI.
Change is happening, y'all, and it's not easy. The world that we know is being shook up. And many of us imagined the magnitude of climate chaos that we'd encounter, right? Like the 500 wildfires that are raging in my home state of California, hurricanes Derecho and Laura, all in the last 2 weeks. We might have foreseen this. Many of us imagined that with climate chaos would come war, that those with power would do everything they could to hold on to it. Some of us might have imagined public health crises, something on the scale of a pandemic. But I don't think any of us could have imagined the collision of these tectonic plates at this scale, at this pace. It's happening fast, and in many ways, it's terrifying. But here's the thing. When tectonic plates collide, magma rises to the surface. Something new emerges, and it's time to let that newness thrive. So here we are. We're in the magma of 2020, and 2020 has been quite the year. COVID and the uprising have revealed two powerful forces at play. The first one is a centuries-old ideology that birthed this country. It's marked by land theft, by genocide, by kidnapping, and by enslavement. It's an ideology that has transformed into a system defined by policies that glorify power and profit and are upheld by corporate control. It's calcified by a tax-subsidized police force that kills or encages Black men, women, and children through a militarized border and threats of deportation to the millions of brown workers that face wage theft and sexual harassment and repetitive stress injuries and COVID risk every day. This ideology is the foundation of a system that we're all steeped in, but the system is dying. It's gasping for breath, it's clinging to power, but we keep giving it CPR. We keep using capitalism and patriarchy and racism, CPR, to keep it alive. It's time to cut life support for a system that was never designed for life to thrive. Life is sacred, and the second force is calling on us to treat it that way. That force is older than time. It's rooted in our ancestral knowledge. It's in our DNA as human beings that are part of an ecosystem here on planet Earth right now. It's a wisdom that's rooted in community, in our care for each other, in an understanding that we are all interconnected. In my job as the founder and the director of the Heal Food Alliance, I get to facilitate an unprecedented collaboration of farmers and ranchers and indigenous leaders, workers and scientists and public health advocates, community organizers connecting and uniting across the country, coming together across race and sector and geography, because we all have a stake in a better future. I want to invite you to take a breath with me for a moment, to feel into your own truth. Because let's face it, the panic and paranoia of the times have a really good hype person. The entire media is selling that to us. But all of you are part of hundreds of people. You are one of hundreds of people who woke up on a Saturday morning to be part of this convergence, to connect with other people, to connect with other Iowans, to connect to our truth. Because our truth is that collaboration, coexistence, community, that's what we crave. That's why we're here. And each of us is in the fight for our lives and the fight for generations to come. If you've ever wondered what you might be doing during slavery, during the Civil War, during genocide, this is it. This is when we make the choice of who we are and who we are going to be as a people. This is our decision point. Are we going to let corporations and fascism reign? Or are we going to listen to our own truth and choose something better together? This moment demands it of us, that we let this new life emerge, this new world thrive, something more beautiful than we ever thought possible. It calls on us to create the possibility of being truly nourished by community, not fed by competition. So can we love ourselves and each other enough to imagine that, to create that together? So what if meatpacking workers in Iowa didn't have to make a choice every day between their lives and their livelihood? What if everybody had enough to survive? What if corporations weren't the ones writing the rules, putting CAFOs across the state? What if communities could actually thrive? What if all people, regardless of race, felt safe? What if all people had access to adequate food, to healthcare? Imagine this future with me, where all beings have the right and the means to thrive, free from exploitation. Imagine being able to look all of your neighbors in the eye, that around us, our communities are strong, even in the face of adversity. Imagine our social culture reflects an agriculture where diversity is strength, where interdependence and community care are valued, indigenous wisdom is honored. If this moment has taught us anything, it's that we can't just try to win reforms in an economy and a system that was never designed for life to thrive. Even as we confront the chaos of 2020, this moment demands that we root into the collective, into real relationships and a sense of purpose. This new story, this world that is fighting to be born, this future that works for all of us, it won't come through capitalism. It won't come through patriarchy. There is no white savior out there for us. No more capitalism, no more patriarchy, no more racism, no more CPR for the old system. Breathe life into the new. Our survival depends on it, on our ability to see ourselves as connected to one another, that each of us has a role to play, skills, resources, relationships, expertise to bring to the table. That being part of a strategic and effective movement for change requires us to see ourselves as part of this ecosystem. Our survival depends on our ability to see our struggles as one, to share in a new story that values all life. And biologists say that the best way to heal an ecosystem is to connect it to more of itself. So I see our movement as an ecosystem, our interconnections as the biodiversity that helps us thrive. And in moments like this, we turn to each other. We learn from each other. We help each other grow and we grow together. Our movements are built on relationships. So who are you building with, Iowa CCI? What are you building towards? Sean laid some of that out for us. And I want to invite you to just take one more breath right now. There are so many ways for us to do the work, so many ways for us to organize. And one way that we will do it together is by voting the fascists out and voting people power in. So for a moment right now, think about two people that you really want to build this new world with. Pull out your phone and text them. These are the two people that are going to be your buddies for the next 65 days. That's what we have. If you have never phone banked before, these two people are going to help make sure that you do that. And you're going to help make sure that they do too. Together in the next 65 days, you'll make phone calls, you'll send postcards, you'll text bank, you might even door knock if you feel safe doing that. Together, you will do everything that you can to turn the tide on this system and then keep fighting beyond that for the world that we all deserve. This moment is what we have, 65 days. Let's do this. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Navina. And hello, everyone. My name is Lori Jones, and I am a member of the Racial Justice Team with Iowa CCI. For more than 2.5 years, the team has been organizing to take action for racial justice right here in Des Moines. The journey over the last 2.5 years has been an uphill battle. An uphill battle due to a weak city council, pushback from the chief of police and his lack of involvement, and just them not accepting the ban that we were pushing forward. But we kept on showing up. We wrote letters, we sent emails, and we made phone calls demanding a ban on racial profiling. Our team organized 3 separate community meetings, which brought hundreds of people in the community out to not only discuss the problem, but to also come up with solutions that we needed. And together we came up with 6 items that the ban needed to include. Those 6 items were a ban on racial profiling, de-escalation and implicit bias training for our Des Moines Police Department, a ban on pretextual stops, data collection and transparency from the Des Moines Police Department, a citizen or community review board, and making marijuana a low priority enforcement. We elevated the voices of young Black men who had been targeted and profiled by the Des Moines Police Department. Why? Because they were driving while they were Black, or they were canvassing while they were Black, or they were walking while they were Black. But we, CCI, we kept showing up to how many city council meetings, I cannot even tell you how many, to all hours of the night, to let our local officials know that they work for us, forcing them to respond to the issue of racial profiling right here in Des Moines. After the death of George Floyd, we saw civil unrest all over the country. In Des Moines, young Black leaders organized, and our young people of all colors, they were in the streets putting their bodies on the line, taking rubber bullets, tear gas, standing up and showing that there is justice for Black lives. And we kept showing up. After 2 years of dragging their feet, the Des Moines City Council finally passed a racial profiling ban because we wouldn't give up. We were persistent, we were tenacious in showing them that everyday people are a powerful force. And the voice of justice together, we can create real change. We didn't get all 6 of the items that we felt needed to be in the ban, so guess what? We will still keep showing up. Today is about celebrating the work that we have done and refueling us for what is ahead. That's why I'm happy to introduce Maurice Mitchell today. Maurice is a nationally recognized social strategist and a visionary leader in the movement for Black lives. Born and raised in New York to Caribbean working class parents, Maurice began organizing as a teenager, and he never stopped. After the police murdered Michael Brown in 2014, he relocated to Ferguson, Missouri to support organizations on the ground responding to police violence, and is a key organizer for the Movement of Black Lives convention in 2015. In addition to his work with the Movement for Black Lives, Maurice is now the national director of the Working Families Party, a grassroots multi-racial coalition of working people building independent political power in communities across the country through organizing and elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lori. It's such an honor to be with you. And I so appreciate all the work that you do every single day on the ground. So good morning, Iowa. It's great to be here virtually with all of you. Like Lori said, my name is Maurice Mitchell. I'm the National Director of the Working Families Party. Now, it's an honor to speak with activists on the front lines of the battle for a more just world. Now, we're gathered together at a remarkable moment. First and foremost, we are on the cusp of what is the biggest election, arguably, of our lifetimes. And now I want to dig into that fight and what it will require of all of us. But before I do that, just a few words about who I am. I feel a lot of kinship with the folks here today. I'm an organizer as well. I grew up on Long Island. Now, some people think of Long Island as a monolithic middle-class white suburb, but Long Island, like so many communities around the country, is more complex and diverse than many people think. It's home to large communities of immigrants, Black folks and other people of color, many working class and poor folks, and families like mine. I am the grandson of a domestic worker who thousands of miles from her own family and without a home of her own took care of the children and homes of others. I am the son of immigrants who were able to provide for children against the backdrop of Reaganomics and the drug wars, thanks to good union jobs. My mother was a nurse, my father an electrician. They both were active in their workplaces and in our community. I was lucky enough to be raised in a family in which organizing and collective struggle was something that was understood and encouraged and even a part of daily life. I've been a community and political organizer for more than 2 decades. I started as a student, a campus organizer at Howard University in DC, and then a grassroots community organizer back home in Long Island. Now, I continued on this path, eventually doing work statewide, drawing together the capacities of dozens of grassroots groups, doing deep integrated voter engagement and organizing. And then 2 occurrences upended my life and reframed my politics and my practice. The first came when Hurricane Sandy ripped through Long Island, devastating my family home and forcing me and my family to become storm refugees, living in hotels for months on end. And then in August 2014, Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, Missouri. Like many in that moment, I decided I couldn't sit on the sidelines as history unfolded before me. I took a leave from my job. I hopped on a plane and joined with local community members and organizers across the country to build the movement for Black Lives. I played a behind-the-scenes role co-founding an organization called Blackbird, which provided capacity and strategic support to organizations and organizers within the movement and helped the movement become an international force. Social movements, like the movement for Black Lives, are about making the invisible visible and rendering the impossible possible. They emerge when political institutions aren't responsive to or flat out ignore the problems that a significant segment of the people are facing. And today, in case you hadn't noticed, we are in crisis. The global pandemic and the botched American response has cost tens of thousands of lives in this country. Millions of Americans are unemployed and face eviction because of inaction in Washington, D.C. Federal troops have invaded major American cities, brutalizing protesters who are standing up for Black lives. We have a world that is burning, melting, and flooding. Children are being thrown in cages across America, whether they're refugees crossing the border or juveniles in our cities. Worse, the powers that be seem happy about it. The stock market is soaring, and the self-styled masters of the universe on Wall Street are comfortable and satisfied, while the rest of us literally fight for our lives. The last 4 years and the last 6 months have exposed all the fault lines that run through our society. All the institutions that we were supposed to place our faith in have failed us. Is it any wonder that there is a mass uprising happening right now, that tens of millions of Americans have taken to the streets? 1 out of every 5 people who call this country home have taken to the streets in righteous fury. As bad as things are, we see now more than ever that people are hungry for a new kind of politics, a politics committed to building power for everyday people in every city, in every county. We must engage in this new kind of politics with humility, care, and curiosity. And we must be rooted in compassion, grace, and most of all, solidarity. The kind of solidarity that recognizes that all of us together are much more wiser and more powerful than any of us alone. I'm not talking about a sign-on letter or a retweet or even showing up to a rally. I'm talking about building a cross-class, multiracial, cross-movement compact, which says that your fight is my fight. Although different, Our fights are inseparable. We rise and fall together. We argue and debate, but do so while fighting for each other's common humanity. That means no one is thrown under the bus. We don't win without the poor. We can't succeed without the over-incarcerated. We don't win without Black folks. We can't achieve victory without the undocumented. That's the kind of solidarity, the kind of movement politics that has animated our greatest wins this year. In New York, a generation of Black and brown candidates have surged to victory, demolishing the establishment status quo. Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, Khalil Anderson, Jabari Brisport. In Washington, D.C., Democrats for Education Reform tried to kill Janice Lewis George's insurgent run for, and they tarred her as a weak on crime and anti-police candidate. Why? Because she wanted to move resources from overfunded police departments to underfunded schools. She wanted to literally defund the police. Normally, those attacks work, but in this moment, it backfired. She ousted an incumbent and will join the DC City Council this fall. In New Mexico, we ousted the conservative Democrats who led the state Senate and replaced them with a cadre of progressive women who will fight to tax the rich, pass paid family leave and paid sick days, and more. In Texas and Michigan and Colorado and Florida, we're electing a new generation of transformational district attorneys who won't just reform our criminal justice system, but co-conspire with our movements to demolish the carceral state. And in Wisconsin and in Pennsylvania and Arizona and so many other battlegrounds around the country, we are building an electoral movement to defeat Trump and the white nationalist movement he has surrounded himself in, and that white nationalist movement that he rode to the White House. Now, we endorsed Joe Biden last month. And to be clear, this was a tactical and strategic decision, not a stamp of approval on Biden's record or his vision. Now, we know for a fact that defeating Donald Trump is essential to building the world we deserve. It allows us to stop having to defend our communities from attacks each and every day and instead move to offense. I want to be the thorn in Joe Biden's side, not Donald Trump's side, because no matter what tactical moves we make, we will always keep to our North Star. An America where it doesn't matter who you look like, where you come from, who you love, or how much money is in your pocket. An America where we all are truly free. That America seems like a long way off, but I believe in my bones that we can get there. And groups like CCI, people's organizations in Midwestern states, have a role to play in getting us there. Iowans voted for Barack Obama over McCain in 2008 by a margin of 54% to 44%. In 2016, they voted for Trump over Clinton for 51% to 42%. That is a 15-point swing over 8 years. We have a lot of work to do. But this moment has radicalized liberals and electoralized radicals, and we could build on that. That's actually a good thing that we should and must build on. Now imagine if just a fraction of those 25 million who joined the movement for Black Lives in the streets dug a little deeper. Imagine if everyone who tweeted or blanked out their profile page or used a hashtag donated their time or chipped in a few dollars. Imagine if a fraction of them went even further than that. So sociologist Theda Chopal estimates that at the very height of the Tea Party, that movement had just about 160,000 activists in the ground. That the Tea Party movement had 160,000 activists at their very height. The New Democratic Party of Canada, think of them as the Working Families Party on the other side of the border, had long argued that it just takes 1% of the eligible voters in a district, trained, self-conscious, and organized people to dominate any electoral contest. At the local level, you barely need even that. So imagine if that cadre of volunteer organizers I talked about the 1%, the evangelical foot soldiers of solidarity. We're doing every day what no broadcast text, direct mail, or digital ad could ever do. Speak as loved and trusted members of a community about why our politics will make a better future for the people they care about. We could get there. We could build that army. So while we're fighting Trump, let's build durable power for the world that comes after him. Let's put our people, our stories, our issues, our demands at the center of the political debate. Let's build our base and organize the multiracial working class that I referred to. Let's turn voters into volunteers, volunteers into activists, activists into organizers, and organizers into the next generation of progressive candidates. Now, there will be those who will say that what we seek is impossible, that in America and a world that works for all of us is beyond our reach, that too many are too cynical to dig deep enough to transform the society, community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood. But as Muhammad Ali put it, impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Now, we're not small, the people here today. In fact, in that quote, he said small men, but many of us aren't men. But we're big in spirit and in hope and in skills. If we do our work, I believe this election will one day be seen as a turning point in our history, not because the Democrats tossed Trump and McConnell into the dustbin of history, although they should, and win state level elections by the barrelful. Though, of course, they must do that, and we must support those efforts to do that. But because this year could mark the beginning of a durable realignment in US politics, and perhaps even in world politics, where one day we'll look back and say, that was the beginning of the end of the Republican Party. That was when racist appeals finally stopped winning elections. That was when we began to see our differences and still reached across them. That was when we realized that we have just but one planet and we are just but one people. That was when we began to live up to the true promise of a democracy that was never yet truly designed for us, but will be fulfilled through our organizing. That was when we began to replace the society we were born into with one that we could truly be proud of, created for the next generation, rooted in love and kindness and solidarity and dignity and even sanctity for all people. That is our sacred mission. Our work, of course, is tactical. Some days it is spreadsheets or turf packets or call lists or peer-to-peer text, but it is all a piece of a sacred duty to finally make our nation and all its people whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice, for giving us an inspiring vision of the world we need to build together. I'm Misty Rebick. I use pronouns she, her, and hers. I was born and raised in Iowa, and I've been a CCI member now for 12 years, a dues-paying member for 12 years. I became a member when I was just 22. Before I get started, I just want to give a shout out to some of the folks I see in the panel. It's good to see you, Lori Young. It's good to see Pat and Ken Bowen. It's great to see Matthew Pierce, Alexa Rodriguez, Alex Andrade, so many of you who I haven't seen in a while, Lisa Whalen. It's great to see you all. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to shoot it to you straight about why I'm here today. First, I'm going to tell you about myself and about what's been on my mind. And then I'm going to ask you to give money to Iowa CCI Action. I'm not going to ask you to do anything I wouldn't do, but I am going to ask you to think about this moment and show up in a big way. So a few months ago, I found myself sitting in my 450 square foot apartment here in DC, wondering, how did I end up here? I was encouraged by the mass protests that were taking to the streets to demand justice for the murder of George Floyd, much like what we're seeing today for Jacob Blake. Yet it was all happening in the middle of a global pandemic and an economic crisis, one like I've never seen in my life. And the truth is, I wanted nothing more than to be back in Iowa with my friends and my family. I was feeling really lost, unsure of how to make a difference in a new city, and not a lot of time to orient myself to our new shared reality. In the last 18 months, I left my home in Iowa City of 10 years to move to Des Moines to set up one of the largest presidential campaigns in recent history. I had been brought on as Bernie's Iowa State Director. After he won the popular vote in Iowa, I caught a plane to DC and was off to lead our national organizing program. And then the pandemic came, and then we suspended the campaign. And after a heartbreaking loss, I had another opportunity to continue to work with Bernie to keep fighting for our progressive agenda as executive director of his Senate campaign. So we got right back to work. We launched in May, and in 3 months, we endorsed more than 80 progressive candidates down the ballot all across the country. We raised millions of dollars for the organizations on the front lines fighting for justice for Black lives. And we helped to usher in a new cohort of the squad with nurse and Black Lives Matter leader Cori Bush from Missouri and New York middle school principal Jamal Bowman, among others. And now we're gearing up to turn out voters all across the country in November. Despite this being one of the toughest summers of my life, I feel incredibly humbled and lucky to be living in this moment where organizing to build power for progressive issues is my job. So again, I find myself asking, how the hell did I end up here? You know, I'm proud that I was raised on the border of Tama and Marshall County in Iowa. I'm proud to be the first college student in my family. I'm proud to have been raised by working class parents. My dad, a truck driver, my mom, a meatpacking worker. And all of that certainly helped me to end up here, no doubt. But the turning point in my life when I found my home was with you, was with Iowa CCI. CCI taught me that ordinary people, people who've lived through struggle and pain, are the most powerful people in this country. Every day, CCI takes people like me, an ordinary rural Iowan, and introduces us to a world of possibilities, gives us tools to harness our righteous anger about the unfairness of our political and economic system, and gives us a path to do something about it. CCI is the home so many of us didn't know we were looking for when we found it. CCI is one of the few places in this world where you can come as you are, and you will be welcomed as you are. At CCI, together, we are challenged to be better, to grow, to evolve. And we are strong and powerful because of our shared belief that nothing in this world, nothing in our country or in our politics is going to change if we don't roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves. We have to do the work ourselves, and we have to fund the work ourselves. In a time when it feels like things are getting worse than ever and taking action can be scary or even worse, seem pointless, I often think of the poet and social justice fighter Audre Lorde. She said, "When we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak. It is better to speak." And at CCI, we talk, we act, and we get it done. Our fight is not just to have a seat at the table, but to run the table. That means we have to build power, grassroots power and political power, and nobody's going to do it for us. It's up to us to put people before profits and communities before corporations. And like the great rap artist and community leader of Atlanta, Killer Mike, says, we have to plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize. And at CCI Action, that's what we do. 24/7, 365, nonstop. It's hard, it's difficult, and sometimes it hurts. When Bernie lost the election, people were sad, hurt, we felt betrayed. Millions of us had stood up, some of us for the very first time, to fight not for a presidential candidate, but for a movement, a political movement that was created by us and funded by us. And that was all about fighting for someone you don't know. The reality is, this moment is still our moment. We are closer than ever to an awakening of mass political consciousness, a moment where more people in recent history have lost their jobs and their healthcare, a moment that calls for moral clarity, where Medicare for all just makes sense, When 30 million people have lost their jobs, it's more clear now than ever why healthcare cannot be tied to employment. And that's why our work as organizers, as plotters, as planners, as action takers, as CCI members, we cannot stop now. We cannot back down, and we will not back down. So back to the question of why I'm here. It's up to us to transform our country through grassroots organizing. And that work never stops. In times like this, it calls for us to do more, to dig deeper, to ask yourself, how will you live out your values in this moment? I was taught at CCI Action, no savior, no one candidate, no political party, no one election cycle is going to save us. It's up to us to save us. We have to do the work and fund the work ourselves. Money from people like us, like you, like me, makes us nimble, independent, and powerful. We don't rely on special interests to dictate our agenda. So look, we've got 66 days until this election, and everything we care about is on the line. That's why CCI Action is launching our biggest electoral organizing program ever. When the votes are tallied on November 3rd, we want to make sure that Trump is a one-term president. Joni Ernst is a one-term senator. We want to shift the political landscape at the State House, putting people over profits. And we want thousands of more people getting involved and taking bold action with CCI. It sounds good, right? So we got to do the work. And we got to fund the work ourselves, because between now and November 3rd, we're going to be on the phones. We're going to be having conversations with thousands of voters. We're going to be mailing folks because, yes, we still believe in the mail and the postal service. We'll be in the newspapers. We'll be on radios. We will be on billboards. We're going to turn out voters in record numbers. That means we got to fund this work. And that means today that we got to raise $35,000 before Labor Day. That's a big goal. But the good news is we've already raised $28,000. You've done that. We've already raised $28,000 towards that goal. So that means today, right here together, we need to raise $7,000 more to meet our goal. And to help us do that, some CCI Action members who believe deeply in our work have put together a generous $10,000 match fund. This fund will match every donation made today, dollar by dollar. That means we have the opportunity to not only meet our goal today, but exceed our goal, which is what we always do at CCI. We run past the finish line. We don't stop at the finish line. So what I'm asking each of you to do is to dig deep and make a stretch gift that will help fund this organizing work through November. So if you were going to give $10 today, I'm asking you to stretch and make it $35. If you were going to give $25 today, what would it mean to give $50? If you were thinking about $100, I'm asking you to think about $250. And if you're a person who can give $500, I'm asking you to consider $1,000. Now, let me be clear. Contributions of all sizes are important and make a difference. I like to say, make a gift that's significant to you in your life right now. In our family, we talk about this a lot. What would be different in our life? What would be different in your life? If you gave $50, $200, or even $2,500. Could you swing it? That's how important this moment is right now. So here's how you can give your gift right now. At the bottom of your screen is a link, cciaction.org/fund2020. But here's the thing, we don't want to lose you, so make sure you open the link on another tab. For those of you who are tuning in on Facebook or YouTube, the link is being dropped in the chat. And if you're on your phone, go ahead and just go to the link and make a gift and come back. We'll be right here waiting for you. If you prefer to give by check, that's great. Mail it in as soon as possible and just write 2020 match on it, and we'll make sure it gets matched. And some of us still like to, make a donation over the phone. That's great. We have people in the office right now who can take your donation over the phone. Just give us a ring at 515-282-0484. If this is your first CCI Action event and you've never made a contribution before, this is the time to do it. Not only will your gift be doubled, but you'll also become a new CCI member and get all of the benefits of being a CCI member. And I want to talk about that for a second, because I get messages all the time on my social media, people asking me, what can they do in this moment? What can they do to be significant and to support and to help and to grow our power? I say becoming a CCI member is the first step in doing something that counts. You're going to get invitations to member meetings and events updates on issues that affect your life, and opportunities to organize on issues directly in your community. And best of all, CCI will teach you how to be an organizer. And we need more organizers now than ever. So take this opportunity and join CCI Action today. And while you're giving your gifts, I'm going to read a few testimonials from folks who have already donated today, some folks that I know pretty well. Really excited to share why Vanessa Marcano Kelly in Des Moines gives. She says, I give to CCI Action because I learned throughout my life that nobody is coming to save us but ourselves. I give time and resources to organizations and people whom I know have my and my community's back. Solo el pueblo salva el pueblo. Only the people will save the people. Stephen Tees from Bloomfield in Southeast Iowa says, the classic saying that the you in union is you applies to CCI. Support means financial as well as emotional support for the work we do. That's why I give to CCI Action. Vanessa and Stephen are right. The gifts that you make right now are crucial to our people-powered work. If everyone on this live stream gives generously today, we'll meet our goal, and we're going to turn out record number of voters because that's what we've got to do. Maurice just talked about it, and several others already have today. Your stretch gift will go a long ways to getting us to that goal. You can just ask someone like Viola Perry from Des Moines. Viola also told us, I joined CCI some years back to help save a neighborhood grocery store. It was a success. Currently, I am part of CCI's racial justice team, which pushed for a racial profiling ordinance in Des Moines. I give to CCI because we talk, we act, and we get it done. And one more from Julie Dunn in Eldora. Julie says, I give to CCI Action because from its founding to this day, this organization exists to make life better for all communities, for everyone. CCI is committed to the idea that we all do better when we all do better, but we can't do it alone. Look, we don't have time to share all the inspiring words and stories that people are sending in about why they're giving their gifts today, but I want you to know something. When I talk about people doing the work and funding the work, I'm talking about bartenders and restaurant workers contributing a full night's worth of tips during the pandemic to CCI. I'm talking about hairstylists who are trying to make a living in the pandemic, stretching to make a gift because they know it's their own future. And I'm talking about teachers and students who are fighting to keep our schools safe in Iowa right now, pitching in to support for the transformational work we're going to do together. And I'm talking about farmers still digging out from the derecho, finding a way to make a donation. We're talking about Iowans from all walks of life, every corner of the state, stepping up to not only do the work, but fund the work, because no one else is going to do it for us. So please make your membership gift and any extra gifts that you can today. Now is the time. We'll report back on our fundraising goal at the end of the convention today. Just remember that we have an incredible opportunity to double our impact. So thank you for giving your time, talent, and treasure to CCI. We're only as powerful as we are because of you and because of our collective action that we take together. And now I can't say enough about this next segment, except that some of my favorite people are leading it. Let me introduce you to my dear friends and fellow CCI Action members and sisters in the struggle, Katie Beekler, who will be moderating a conversation between two amazing movement candidates. First, my old boss, Kathy Glosson, and also Chelsea Chisholm Vargas. They'll discuss their experiences in Iowa politics and why, yes, it's important to vote, but why we also need to go beyond voting and build a people-powered movement that will last for generations. With that, I'll turn it to you, Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Beekler. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Iowa City. I am a CCI Action Fund member and a staff at SEIU Local 199. I'm excited to have Kathy Glosson and Chelsea Chisholm Vargas here today with me to chat about movement politics. Could the two of you please introduce yourselves? Maybe we can start with Chelsea.
Yes, hello folks. My name is Chelsea Chisholm Vargas. My pronouns are she, her, ella in Spanish. I live in Des Moines, from the south side of Des Moines, Iowa. And yeah, right now I'm working on a few things. I'm employed with Planned Parenthood Advocates of Iowa PAC. And so right now we're really focusing on getting folks into office who support sexual and reproductive health. But outside of my day job, focus in the community. So right now, doing a lot of work with Des Moines Black Liberation Movement.
Great, thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Glosson. Pronouns are she, her. I live in Coralville, Iowa. I am a registered nurse, worked at University of Iowa hospitals and clinics in the intensive care unit for many years. I serve as the elected president of the Service Employees International Union, Local 199 here in Iowa. I'm a proud CCI Action member and really excited to be here with you today. And I also was a candidate for governor in the Democratic primary in 2018. We came in second in that race as a bold progressive candidate. So I'm really excited to be in this conversation today.
Thanks, both of you. So I'm going to start things off with the first question, just simple question. What is movement politics? Chelsea, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start it off. Movement politics, that's definitely a term that I heard from CCI. Being a CCI action member as well, it's something that I heard a lot, and I kind of, I asked for the definition, but I really learned what it meant just from doing the work, just from organizing with folks. Movement politics, I would say it's really kind of what we want politics to be, or what politics should be. It's people powered. And instead of this kind of hierarchical structure of politics working from like the top down, it's more hyper focused on those who are most impacted by the issues, which are usually the folks who are on the ground, right? Those are like the issue experts. So I would definitely say movement politics is really focused on grassroots work, individuals working in grassroots movements, and focus on people who really care about their communities and are working with the resources they have. But also movement politics is really about recognizing structures, right? Oppressive structures and how they're keeping us out of politics. So recognizing them, identifying them, dismantling them, acknowledging them, and rebuilding what we want politics to look like, what we know movement politics should look like, which is going to be people focused and people powered.
Awesome. Kathy, same question.
Yeah, movement politics is about doing politics differently than business as usual. We've all experienced it in our lifetime about how we want change, but nothing ever happens when we continue to elect the same leaders that do things from the top down and not the bottom up. So for me, movement politics is really less about the person, the candidate, but more about the issues that people are facing in our state, our communities, and our country. And it's about empowering people to be involved in the political movement of a candidate or a candidate's position to create change like never seen before. And I've had the experience of that as a candidate that really believes in and ran a gubernatorial campaign here in Iowa that had wholeheartedly believed in movement politics, because it is not about me as an individual candidate, but it's about us as people and how are we changing and pulling the levers of government so that they work for all of us and not just the wealthy few. And there's specific things that we do differently in movement politics, and we maybe can talk about that as we, chat a little bit more. But it's just a different way of doing politics where people are first, and candidates are the mechanism by which the voice of the people is expressed.
Both of you brought up, in one way or another, interesting points about making sure that that people are in charge, that people's voices are the ones that we're hearing, that people have the say in what elected officials do. And so I guess the question is, how do we keep elected officials accountable to the people? Kathy, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, because when I decided to run for governor, that's a pretty major decision to make. And if I would have been elected, the way that you hold me accountable as a governor or a city councilor or a superintendent, county superintendent, is by the people-powered movement demanding the change, that I cannot not move in that direction because of the demand that my constituents are making on me as an elected leader. It's about the things that we're seeing now in the streets, the Black Lives Matter movement, the climate movement, the movement for Medicare for all, that you can see how the people-powered action that we're all taking together is sort of shifting business as usual candidates to the left, to our agenda. And that's what this is really all about. And that's the only way we can hold elected officials accountable to do the right thing, by continuing to organize, mobilize, energize the base to do the right, to get the candidates and the elected officials to do the right thing.
Thanks, Kathy. Chelsea, same question. How do elected officials stay accountable to the people?
Yeah, I don't know. I hear this a lot, right? Like, we have to hold them accountable. I hear that a lot. I think accountability really starts with yourself. So it's kind of interesting to say, how do we hold elected officials accountable when we don't have a structure in place that is supporting candidates that are people-powered candidates, right? It's like the candidates and the elected officials that we have are very much backed by big corporations. So they're not accountable to us. And we really need to acknowledge that, acknowledge the reality that we're living in. They're accountable to the people who are filling their pockets. And that's, it's definitely us, but they're looking for the businesses for their support. So I think the real way that we acknowledge accountability in elected officials is really uplifting candidates who are already accountable to their communities, who the reason that they get into politics is to fully be in support of their communities, because we're not going to get accountability the way that we want it from these super PAC backed candidates. That's just the truth. They're not accountable to us. And so the way that we have to force them to be, right, is like what Kathy said, people power. We definitely need to remind them who voted them into office or not, who they're representing. But I do struggle with that. I really do think accountability comes from oneself and their ability to connect and really understand their community. So I think we have to even take a step back. Before we're holding people accountable, we need to know, are they with us? Are they even accountable to us? Because we don't want to waste our time when we can be finding someone who already is committed to us and uplifting their work.
And I just want to add to what Chelsea says is that, in the union movement, and I know in progressive organizations, what we call that is a candidate or a leader that actually walks the walk and just doesn't talk the talk. And so I think you're spot on about, we have to hold ourselves accountable, and elected leaders also have to come out of the movement itself, or we're never going to get to the change that we all need and want to see and deserve.
Thanks. Yeah, Chelsea, I think that your point about lifting up people who are already accountable to their communities is really interesting. I know that we're seeing not tons, but we're seeing more and more people who are part of their own community, have been organizing their own communities. We have folks in Congress right now that are part of the squad. I know Cori Bush just won her race in Missouri, which is exciting. Folks who are on the ground doing the work are now running for office and getting elected because they've been accountable to their own communities, because their communities know what they've done and what they stand for. So I'm curious if there are programs that you've seen in your own communities in our state that are examples of movement politics in action.
Yeah, I can definitely start with that. There's a lot. One, though, especially since we're doing this with CCI, is CCI's racial justice team. The racial justice team is awesome, and the staff who are leading it are really leading it based off of what the members are saying and what the members are wanting. And I'm a racial justice team member as well, and so having been in the fight with our CCI racial justice team as we pushed for a racial profiling ban was really important. And then I ended up running for city council, Des Moines Ward 4, and the racial profiling ban was absolutely, one of my top issues. So it's really important that we recognize, again, People are coming from these smaller groups, right? Like the racial justice team is a great example of a local one. But there's still a lot of other things that folks can do and get a part of when we're talking about movement politics and action. It happens all the time. And sometimes it's not necessarily an easily identifiable group. Maybe they're not with an organization, but they're just people pushing on an issue. I think we can find those, you can find it at your local neighborhood association. You can find it just communicating with your friends. It's not always going to look organized, and it doesn't need to be. So I think we also need to recognize, like, movement politics shows up in the communities that we're already existing in. We just kind of need to understand how to identify it, because it looks a lot of different ways.
You both brought up a couple of questions ago about elections and how we tend to have this habit of, we organize for this election, we phone bank for this election. It's how we talk about things. And I know a lot of us are experiencing right now of talking about, well, we just have to get to this election. We just have to elect this person, and then we can do XYZ work. But you both were talking about, like, we have to do more than just that. We have to do more than just electing one person and hoping that they will do what we need them to. So how can we break out of an election year only model of politics and shift towards a year-round vision of building power for communities and for everyday people?
Do what CCI does every day. That to me is a very simple question. Elections happen every 4 years, every 2 years, and we engage people on the doors with canvassing and phone calling, and then we don't talk to them at all. The election is either won or lost on an individual candidate, and then we don't go back to our neighbors or talk to them for another year or 2 or 3, depending on the election cycle. And so we're talking about movement politics is about not just using an election cycle to engage on issues and mobilize on issues, but do it every single day. And it's not easy. Well, actually, it is easy. If you believe that there can be a better world and that we can live in better communities that support one another and offer the things that we all need to survive, which is, a job that you can feed your family on, healthcare that's reliable and not dependent on whether you have a job or not, which we're seeing affects so many people during this pandemic right now. It's about making sure that we all have a right to clean water and clean air. I mean, it's not rocket scientists. We all need this. And I think sometimes we go way over people's head in how we describe things. And that's what I love about CCI. It's a gut conversation that is so important to have with folks. Because at the end of the day, when you talk to them and you listen to them, they want exactly what we're talking about. It's just that we need to make sure that we build that community every single day so that it's not just based on one election cycle to another.
Thanks, Kathy. Chelsea, how about from you?
Again, I really think it's important that we recognize that, like, elections are not going to save us. They haven't saved us. They never will save us. That doesn't mean don't vote, right? I mean, participate in elections and participate in government, but we need to be able to think beyond it. We need to really move away from just thinking to go to the polls and that's where our liberation is, or even that's where safety is. We need to really understand that is one component to all of this. There's so many ways that we need to build power. But I really think it comes with kind of this awakening of realizing we need to step out of just thinking of elections and just thinking of voting and just thinking of candidates. We really need to start thinking of the issues. And, like, that's what one thing Kathy mentioned too, is shifting towards not just elections, not just candidates, but what is healthy for our lives. And I agree, once most people start talking about those things, we really come to mutual understandings because we're talking about values, right? We're talking about what's really important to us and our families. So yeah, I do think an awakening needs to come from folks realizing that just this political system is not working and it hasn't worked. And we need to be honest in that. And if we really want to shift and change, we need to start connecting more just with our, like you said, with our neighbors, right? Connecting more with ourselves. What is it that you really need? And yeah, it will come into not just like a year-round vision, but just a lifetime, right? Realizing that we got to where we are today with everything that we had today because people were fighting, not just because people were voting, right? People were fighting, people were building movements. And it's our duty to just continue to carry that. So that's one thing I really feel like in this country, it really is our duty to like keep pushing for progress, keep moving these things forward. And we need to really understand that that happens on the streets, not at the ballot box.
Well said, Chelsea.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having us. Shout out to CCI Action Fund. We love you.
And we love you. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Adam Callanan, and I use he, him pronouns. I moved to Iowa 2 years ago, and I've been a CCI member since the start of this year. Recently, I've been working on the Movement Politics Leadership Team, working with the concepts that Katie, Kathy, and Chelsea were just discussing. They brought up how movements are created naturally, and our job is actually pretty straightforward once we acknowledge how these movements operate. Part of our job is to find these movements that bring people together and show individuals the power in collective action and bring them into our shared vision for a better Iowa. Last week, I took a trip to volunteer at a donation site in Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids is still dealing with the aftermath of the recent climate disaster. The group that I was working with was not an established organization, but a group started by one person who saw the needs of the community and knew that they could bring people together with a shared vision. It doesn't get more grassroots than that. Even brand new movements have massive power, and this donation site was no exception. Immediately, the establishment was upset with what they were doing because it showed the glaring gaps in assistance at the federal, local, and state level. The local government, local businesses, United Way, and even Red Cross were clearly threatened by the community coming together to support themselves. Building this kind of power is saving lives by providing supplies to those in need, from tents for the displaced to groceries for families that are suddenly unable to support themselves. That kind of power, even when it's built around something as direct and loving as a supply hub for storm victims, is still seen as a threat to the establishment. Similarly, Black Lives Matter protesters in Des Moines have been seen as a huge threat to every level of government. Using nonviolent methods, they have been met with all forms of violence from local and state police, including tear gas, rubber bullets, and direct physical confrontation. This violence is tragic, but it is an acknowledgement of power and the fear that the establishment has of a unified community. After this movement disrupted virtual city council meetings, the council decided to entirely cut off public comment and silence their critics. Being silenced directly instinctively feels like a loss in the moment, but the power in the action is the reaction. And this showed even something as simple as speaking up at a city council meeting threatens their power. Being seen as a threat can feel uncomfortable, but it is a direct acknowledgement of people power that we're working to build. As we heard earlier before, when building a movement, there aren't really win or lose scenarios that are clear cut, as there are with traditional electoral politics where you just count the votes and pick a winner. This makes progress murky at times, but it becomes clear as the years turn and we win things like the executive order for voting rights for felons, the Des Moines mask mandate, and as we watch public opinion shift. Voting does not shift public opinion, it measures it. Movement politics allows us to shift public opinion, and then when public opinion moves towards justice, we have a better world in and out of the ballot box. Plus, along the way, we establish a community that defends each other. My big takeaway from these recent events is that the people in power are really counting on us, believing that we are powerless. This is one of the lies they teach us. If you look beyond the surface, you can see that we have power to make the change that we need. CCI uses movement politics to help people recognize and build power for themselves, to fundamentally challenge how politics work, and that is how we win. Our movement politics leadership team is currently organizing around the general election. We're doing this work to elevate our values with candidates that work with us, but we also know that candidates in elections are not going to save us. This is excellent work for CCI because it allows us to build our people power across Iowa for the elections. As we organize for this election and beyond, we have our sights on Kim Reynolds' seat that's up for grabs in 2022. She's failed Iowa time and time again, as she allows the corporations and the wealthy few to use these tragedies to move more and more public money to big ag and other private interests. We are preparing for a big push from September through November, aiming to talk to 20,000 Iowans by phone banking. These conversations are powerful, especially in times of isolation. They have helped remind me that we are never alone in this fight and that our unity is our strength. Use the link, going to be on the screen somewhere in a second, cciaction.org/takeaction to sign up and take action and phone bank with CCI. This is one easy way to help us along our path to victory. No matter what the issue, the path to victory requires us to bring more people to demand the change that we need. We're standing up for racial justice, economic justice, and health justice. When we acknowledge that these struggles are the same at their core, we open up our organizing potential and raise the limits of our movement. The experience we gain in these actions translate directly to each other. The experience we gain organizing these conditions translate directly to each other. When we connect these experiences, we create a broader and more effective movement and find ways to connect our personal stories to our current fight for justice. I'm thrilled to announce our keynote speaker, Marisa Franco. Marisa Franco is a community organizer and Latinx rights advocate. She's the director and co-founder of Mi Gente, a digital hub for grassroots organizing for Latinx and Chicanx people. In over 10 years of organizing, Marisa has led innovative and effective grassroots campaigns in low-income communities and communities of color. Without further ado, someone with no shortage of experience fighting for justice, Marisa Franco.
Buenos dias. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. I so wish that I could be with you all in person today. Regardless, I'm happy to connect, and I thank CCI Action for inviting me to participate. Coming at this point in the program leaves me with the challenge of having to follow all of these leaders and colleagues who I deeply respect, but I also get the benefit of them having laid out a tapestry, right, of what we're up against and what we need to do. So I'm actually going to start focusing a little bit of a more personal side and impacts of COVID and what I think it presents in terms of both opportunities and challenges to our justice work. So when I imagined 2020, I imagined it was going to be like a slodge, like no doubt. I imagined things coming at us from all these different directions, scandal, ploys, rumors, threats, those curveballs. We'd have to figure out which ones we swing at and which ones you just let pass us by. Through and through, though, I imagined an inch by inch, block by block march towards the largest mobilization of voters in the history of this country. It wasn't flowery. It wasn't that I thought that we were guaranteed victory or that an electoral defeat of Donald Trump would signal the end of Trumpism. But the stage was set. This year has been everything but predictable. There is no stage. At times, I felt like we have the most important election of our lifetimes, the highest stakes, and that we're forced to fight with our hands tied behind our back. As an organizer, I've sat dumbfounded at times of how are we going to mobilize? How do we rally? How do we do the work of reaching people contact-free? It has felt like our tools only reach those who are already engaged, and all the while, the curveballs have kept coming. The threats have shown themselves in real time. No longer possibilities, they are our reality. When I've felt like this, I've thought about my family. I've thought about the line of ancestors who came before me. My father was a factory worker who lost his job after the passage of NAFTA. My family was on public assistance for most of the time I was in high school. I saw most of my uncles lose their jobs. My mother cleaned hotel rooms, took care of children, cleaned houses, and they were considered a step up from generations past. The reason I say this is that at some point in my upbringing, I understood that my upbringing was of the working class, the border crossers, the make do with what you got kind of people. The people who don't proclaim to have that Henry Ford entrepreneurial spark and who are left out of the history books, but who are actually the ones who were instrumental in producing the big ideas, who fix the things that didn't work, who tinker, who beam with a quiet pride when the finished product rolls off that assembly line, or that hot plate comes out of the kitchen, or when that baby grows into a full-fledged, fantastic human. I've thought of them and I've called on them when I feel myself slipping into a place of complacency, doubt, stagnant anger. Me figuring out how to do outreach, how we turn up, how we keep up in these dizzying times is nothing. Or at least I can't have the arrogance to think I'm the only one. I want to share some of the ways this time has forced some good on me, this time of being home all the time. I share it in case you have had similar moments or are in need of ideas of how to get through this. This time has forced me to sit still. Most of the time I was running from meeting to meeting, place to place, doing thing to thing. It was dizzying. I happen to love dizzy. Sitting in my house, I purged, clearing the way for things that have accumulated past their use. I brought attention to relationships and even conflicts that I'd let sit. I've had to grapple with how do I relate to people in my life, including my 70-year-old mother and my 2.5-year-old son. It forced me to ask, how am I a freedom fighter here? How do I seek justice and foster it right here? This time has offered me the opportunity to be more intentional. It has made me recognize how my actions impact others, from practicing social distancing to exploring connection and deepening relations to others. It has made me understand in a more embodied, practical, and not theoretical sense how truly interdependent we are with one another. Like you all, I believe we need big change in this country. I deeply believe in the wisdom and can-do of regular, everyday people to make that change happen. The last several years have left me at times feeling like it's at our fingertips, and other times like everything we hold dear is hanging by a string. That's the thing, though. It's both. That's the kind of times we're living in. We're living in times where the leaves are changing color at the wrong time, when what used to be natural once-in-a-while occurrences are every year human-caused disaster. We are living in a time where we regularly witness death streamed, each time with more cruelty. We are living in a time when so much of our justice-minded advances are being dismantled, from our voting rights, labor rights, migrant rights. The powers that be are not even bothering to wordsmith or hide. They will break. They're not looking to wordsmith or hide their crimes anymore. They're showing us every day the laws do not apply to them. They will break every rule, every law, moral or legal, in order to hold on to power. Recently, when listening to this podcast called Movement Memos with Kelly Hayes, she broke down the rise of fascism and tackled the question that I would imagine many of us think about. How did people let it happen? Something she said, really stuck with me. She said there was this dizzying array of things, of stuff, of crap, of problems. And it created this feeling amongst communities and activists that you can't focus, you can't settle, and you can't connect. That's my 2-year-old. You might have wondered why I went on about sitting in my house during COVID. And it's because I want to visualize that in a time where we've needed to be most connected and moving most collective, it's a time that's felt most isolating. As we prepare to mobilize, to talk to our neighbors, and all do our part to secure the best outcome of this election season, I want to visualize the work we are doing and we must do on ourselves. Because in order to build a stronger collective to take action, in order to build a more perfect union, as people, we must enter into those covenants and that sacred work whole and not broken. It is part of the work as well, and it makes our collective work even stronger. Community organizing teaches us that no one is coming to save us. We transform ourselves and each other to save ourselves. History shows us through our many advancements and achievements, ordinary people can do extraordinary things, and we are. Think on the bravery, the acts of solidarity, the creativity, the TikTok takedown of Trump's rally in Oklahoma, the undeniable, audacious defense of Black life. We are winning at the ballot box. Our policy solutions are among the most popular in this country. Our movements are growing. And on the other side, the overwhelming message at the Republican National Convention this week was be afraid. And you know what? I agree. We should be afraid. We should be afraid of what will happen to this country if we do not act and unequivocally deliver a message and momentum to turn back and defeat Trumpism. How can we be afraid of building a healthcare system that places well-being over profits? Why should we be afraid of not having police who operate as judge, jury, and executioner? What's so scary about having a government that works for the people and not simply corporations? What we're facing at times feels like a horror show. We must not mince words. And having to fight it off amidst a pandemic at times feels like an insurmountable challenge. I posit, however, that there is no greater window for transformative change in this country. The fact of the matter is, the overlapping crises of our time, the economy, climate change, health, and racism will force a remaking of this country. It's just a question of what country this will be. Will it be one that turns to its history of genocide, theft, oppression, profit, and a rugged individualism for the working class and socialism for the billionaires? Or will it be one that seeks to make true, finally, the words etched into the forming of this place? And in order to do that, one that recognizes and repairs the harms done in order to build it. This moment reminds me of childbirth. You can prepare, you can plan, but nothing is like that moment when the pain hits you and again, hits you again and again and again and again. It can be scary. For me, in my own personal experience, I got to the point where I felt like there was no other way but forward to keep pushing, and that terrified me. Part of the fear was not believing that I could do it. And the other part of us not understanding what was on the other side. We don't know what is on the other side here. But I believe that you, we are all here for a reason. We are of this time for a reason. It is our time to push. It is our job to confront our fears, to confront the things that we have left undone in our homes, in our communities, and in this country and in this world, and fight like hell to remake this place that is worthy of future generations, to make this place one that honors our planet and lifts up the good left in all of us. Thank you.
Thanks to Marisa and all of our speakers for helping us think bigger and dream bolder.
Wow, Cherie, what a morning, huh? Such powerful,
incredible stuff.
Speakers, amazing. So we know we need a future that works for all of us, whether this is your first convention or your 21st.
History tells us that real change only comes about when everyday people organize, stand shoulder to shoulder, and fight for a better world. That's why over the next few months, CCI Action is going to be reaching out to thousands of Iowans, mobilizing them for transformative change in the 2020 elections and beyond.
So if you're ready for the big changes that we need to keep our communities safe and healthy and striving, there are two things that we're going to ask you to do today. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is please sign up and take action with us. And the second thing that I'm going to ask you to do is join us as a member to give an extra gift. Like Misty said so powerfully, we have to do the work and then we're going to have to fund the work to win the change that we know we need. So please jump in and join our statewide network of justice fighters. We're a tough and we're a tenacious bunch, but we win big for everyday Iowans.
There are several ways that you can continue to stay involved in the coming months as we build our movement for justice.
So take a look at cciaction.org/take action. There you're going to find a list of all of our upcoming activities, including all the ways that you can stay involved with CCI Action. And if you sign up to stay involved, you're going to get a free Rooted in Justice bandana that's designed by Des Moines artist Kevin Ha. You're going to see that Cherie right there is modeling that bandana right there. It's pretty sweet, man.
Very, very cool.
So this locally crafted, locally printed artwork is a great way to show your CCI pride.
We're approaching an incredibly important election, but our work has to be about more than one candidate or one political race. We have to do work that ensures that people have real power in 2020, 2030, and beyond. We need clean water, racial justice, Medicare for all, an economic system that's built on uplifting everyday people and the planet, not exploiting them.
So if you're registered for the convention, you're going to be receiving an email with more information about how you can stay involved with CCI Action in the future. This email link is going to include a link where you can donate to support our People First work. Sign up to be a part of it.
Earlier today, Misty called on each of you to support CCI Action with a financial contribution, and you delivered. I just got an update. Holy cow, $11,676 from 114 people so far. When we say people are hungry for change, by golly, we mean it. Thank you very much. Keep giving. This is important work to do. I am so inspired by this community. This year, I gave the biggest contribution I've ever given to CCI Action because I know we need to dig deep for transformative change this year. We hope you will give today, but if you can't, just send in that check later and write on the envelope that you'd like your gift to be matched.
It is gifts like yours that allow us to be nimble, allows us to be independent, and allows us to be very, very powerful. We are so very, very grateful for your support because without it, we can't do our work. We can't do the work that makes Iowa a better place for all of us, a better place for our kids and for our grandkids.
My beloved brothers and sisters, rooted in justice, thank you for giving generously and making our first ever virtual convention such a success. Today, we gathered hundreds of Iowans to hear from some inspiring speakers. We raised thousands of dollars to support real change in Iowa, and we strengthened our sense of community.
We know these times are tough, and we know they're getting tougher, but we cannot let fear rule the day. We have to move forward and lead with the politics of hope. We have to believe that big change is possible. We have to believe in the power of community and have to believe in the power of people. We have to work together, we have to struggle together, and we have to build a better world together.
We have a long road ahead of us. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But if we want to kick Kim Reynolds to the curb and ensure that Donald Trump is a one-term president and Joni Ernst is a one-term senator, we have to elect candidates from our communities who will work for us, with us, and for structural change that our communities need to thrive, not just survive.
But ultimately, we know politicians, they're not going to save us. We know candidates aren't going to save us. This is lifelong work, and we have to work together to build the future that we deserve.
It is such an honor to serve as the board president of Iowa CCI Action. I do this work because I believe in the power of grassroots organizing and in the future that we can build together. And I'm excited to see what that future holds for us and for Iowa.
So thanks again for joining us this morning. And please don't forget to donate and get involved with cciaction.org/fund2020 and cciaction.org take action. Let's keep working for an Iowa that puts people before polluters, people before police violence, and people before profits.
Thanks for spending your Saturday with us. Thanks for your membership. Thank you to all the members who helped make this event even happen today. Thanks for believing that a better world is possible. For a People First Iowa, I'm Cherie Mortiz.
And I'm Tom Mohan. Thanks again.
Keep fighting, Iowa.
streets.